Anytime I'm reviewing or auditing a website, I'm keeping my eye out for different things that maybe I'd consider symptoms of some sort of underlying problem. It's really, it's pretty similar to going to the doctor, right? You go there, they start asking you questions, they get sort of a surface understanding of what's happening, look for areas to focus, and then dive in. And so that's typically what I'm doing. And so there are certain kind of telltale signs that maybe somebody isn't paying very close attention to optimizing their website. Now, optimizing could mean a lot of different things, right? Maybe it's the content itself. Maybe it's something visually. Maybe it's more aesthetic. Maybe it's speed or mobile friendliness, or there's all sorts of different things, right? One of the fastest ways that I can understand or really tell if somebody's paying attention to their website or not is if they have proper structure and hierarchy for the headings on their site, right? So you may have a differing level of familiarity with this, but the headings on the site are H1 through H6, right? They're HTML elements that basically give structure to the page. Ideally, every page would have one H1 that's on the page. That's kind of usually a big statement, or almost looks like a label at the top of the page that's explaining, here's what this page is really about. There should only be one on the page, at least by the book. And then after that, each section would have an H2, right? And it says what the section is about. And then within that, if you have subsections, you would have an H3. And what this does, it's kind of like an outline, right? So if you're in a Google Doc or a Word doc or something like that, and you're creating an outline, same idea really. And what that does is that indicates to search engines or crawlers, here's the structure of the page. We have a very clear understanding of what's on the page. And then also for anybody who's using like an assistive technology like a screen reader, it really helps them navigate the page as well. And so that's related to accessibility, or you may hear ADA compliance, right? That's all wrapped up in this. And so when I'm looking for that, I want to see, does a website use proper headings and hierarchies? And so how you might apply this, if you have a website, maybe you inherited it, it's been around for a while, you really don't know and you haven't checked, this is something that you can do and look at your site to understand, how much care was taken when creating it and building it. So I just picked two different consulting sites. This was a quick Google. I picked BCG and then another one I found. So I'm not trying to pick on anybody here, but just want to show you a couple differences, right? So I would kind of expect that BCG would have all this in place correctly. And so what you can do, so I'm in Chrome right now. If you're not familiar with inspect, basically you right click on an element and you hit inspect. It's going to pop up this down here. You may already be familiar with this, but then you can go in here and see if somebody is properly using an H1. So this is visually, it does look like an H1 because it's the biggest on the page. And also when you look in the markup, it is an H1. And then what you want to see is when you go down the page, there's going to be other types of content, right? But I see something big that looks like it's a heading. Now, one thing I'll step aside and talk about for a second is what you see visually. Just because something is the biggest doesn't mean that it's always the H1, right? So you can use CSS to style these things differently, right? But what we're talking about here is in the code, in that outline, is it actually following proper hierarchy? Then I go to this next element. I'll right click on it, and yes, it's an H2. So what it's saying is this whole page is about aerospace and defense. And then we have a section here talking about their consulting services for aerospace and defense. Then they have links to the details in here, which may or may not be an H3. They're not. That's okay. That's no big deal. That's fine. And then here we have another section that's saying, here's how we actually help aerospace and defense companies. And so when Google sees something like this, they can understand, got it. Here's a page about aerospace and defense. Here's the services they offer. Here's how they help. Here's some of the work that they've done, right? It's very, very clear what's going on here, right? We have an H2. We'll see. Not an H3, not a big deal necessarily if there's not an H3. So I don't have any examples of an H3 right now, but basically if you had like really clear subsections, maybe you would want to be having that. And I should note too, the headings go through H1 all the way through H6. Now let's look at this other example. Again, not picking on them, right? But you see our expertise. That's what this page is about. I got here by going to our expertise. When I look at this, it is an H2, which is not what you want, right? Because we've skipped that H1. If a crawler were going to this page trying to understand it, they'd see, H1 is missing. Okay, not ideal. Now, I'm not saying it's doom and gloom. A site is never going to rank or anything like that if you don't have these, but this is a pretty clear indicator to me that, this wasn't a priority. Like the actual structure when it was created was not a priority, which then means they probably haven't paid any attention to SEO or optimization or anything like that. So that would be important. So there should be one H1 on the page. So instead of an H2, this should be an H1, right? So it may or may not have any sort of visual impact, right? See, here it didn't even. So that changed. That would be good. That's what you want. It's an H1 on the page. Then we go down and we have these teeny tiny little pieces of text here. Those should actually be an H2, right? Because they follow an H1. Now, you might have more text sometimes on a page, but these really should all be an H1. So in this case, yeah, it probably will visually change what it looks like. So you could always adjust that with some CSS. Oh, it didn't actually, because it's specifying a style there. So anyways, my main point here is that, if you just want a quick kind of gut check of, is somebody paying attention, or should I be doing a little bit of work or minor surgery on my site, this is a good place to look. Oh, and here's an H1. That's good. That's what you want. There's an H1. And then let's see what we do. Ooh, see, that's an H3. They skipped H2. So you don't want to do that. You always want it to be one H1 on the page, and then any section would have an H2, subsection H3, subsection would have H4, and just be really clear with that. So quick indicators of how to really understand if maybe you should be paying more attention to that optimization of your site.